Okay, I'm shooting off the cuff at the Crystal River Archeological Site near Crystal River, Florida. And these places just, they boggle the mind, they beg many questions, and pique so much interest. Of course, for a layman like myself, but I'm sure for archaeologists as well. This is one of the better preserved sites in Florida, a small town that was occupied for 1,000 years, from about AD 50 to AD 1100. It was Florida peoples, probably Calusa, but definitely was influenced by Adena or Hopewell traditions. You've got temple mounds, you've got earthworks, you've got burial mounds, and much, much more. For all intents and purposes, this was just a happy village. Evidence dug up from the midden. A midden is basically a landfill. Shows that this place was thriving. This is almost a tropical environment. There was abundant food, abundant resource, and these people were very, very happy.
The Crystal River Mound Complex is one of the longest inhabited sites in Florida, probably occupied for around 1,600 years. It was a destination site where people from all over the outlying lands and settlements wished to be buried, carrying their dead hundreds of miles to be buried in its conical burial mounds, the earliest of which was constructed in 250 BC. The burial mounds contain copper artifacts from Michigan and Ohio, which means they had extensive trade networks. But a change occurred during the city's evolution. The older burials were of the Hopewell style, being buried with trade goods, but the later burials contained no grave goods, meaning those trade routes probably were no longer existence, or that the culture in its growth began to take a differing view of physical goods and riches. One of the later burial complexes contains the remains of over 1,500 people.
Even a simple place such as this evokes a lot of magic and mystery. And there is some magic and mystery here because, especially again for a layman like myself, you see all these pyramid cultures in North America with their astrological alignments, the planned layouts of the cities, and the enticing shapes of the mounds, temple mounds with their platforms and their ramps. It just says, man, were these people in touch with the Maya? Because that empire was thriving at the same time as these. But there's no archaeological evidence whatsoever to suggest that any communication existed between these cultures and the ones just across the Gulf. But an enticing, tantalizing little bit of evidence of possible connection is here at Crystal River because this site contains stelae. In the Mayan culture, every pyramid would have a stele placed in front of it with carvings, pictographs, kind of talking about the conquest, the legacy, the achievements of the ruler of the city. And while these are not carved with such proclamations, there were carved stones found here, surrounded with grave goods, surrounded with figurines, treasures, shells, and more. So it's just a little bit of strange connection that we once again see between these cultures and the cultures that live south of here.
The stela in question is a limestone slab upon which is a carved human face and torso, 4 of which in total are found at the site. This could be evidence of at least a slight bit of cultural cross-pollination happening across the waters of the Gulf Coast with the cultures of Mesoamerica. But there's really no proof for it. It's just a tantalizing guess.
But aside from idiotic guessing games from laymen such as myself, we do know this was a thriving place. I mean, it lasted for 1,000 years. Name me a North American city built by European descendants that has lasted that long or will last that long. They did quite well for themselves. The fishing was good, and we know this because these mounds are made out of shells. Millions upon millions of oyster shells.
What distinguishes the mounds of the southeastern coastal regions is that they were made of shells. They were shell middens. Often these middens were not intentional constructions, but the result of the accumulation of tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of discarded oyster shells over decades of repeated fishing and feasting, essentially trash heaps. But as these heaps took shape, they were then intentionally reconstructed and added to in order to serve as the foundation of platform mounds. And it is because of this long period of use and development that excavating archaeologists find so many
artifacts from Ohio, from Arizona, from Michigan, buried in that mound, copper, jade, and meteoric iron, which talks about the extensive scientific knowledge that these ancient peoples have and how foolish it is for us to think of them as primitive, that they could discern what kind of iron came from outer space. And they knew it was significant, and they buried themselves with it. Thankfully, this place has been pretty well preserved by the state of Florida, saved from the original landowner, who, in the 50s, bulldozed this place to use as landfill. The Temple Mound, the massive shell mound, only 1/3 of it remains today because he took a fucking bulldozer to it just to fill in this river a little bit and make a nice dock for his boat. White people, right?